Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus. I am scrotum trapped in a roll-up car window.
And I am car driving over a scrotum.
Are you just doing the inverse of everything I do now?
Yeah, I don't always come up. I try to improvise, keep it loose. Sometimes it comes out really good, right? So I guess, man, I gotta say we've got a weird show for you today.
Yeah, we definitely do. Our setup's a little bit different. We got another 4 albums for you, but in this case, we shifted some things around. So, in this case, I've got 3 albums and you've got 1, and it'll be reversed next week. We just found a couple records that were better to pit against each other.
Next week we'll be doing some industrial black metal. Was it ever a good idea, and is it a good idea now?
I mean, I think it was definitely a good idea for several of those albums, but...
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, we'll see. Yeah, we're going to do the new committee next week. Anyway. Along with And Oceans.
Yeah. The committee has never really been industrial, but they're coming from a similar, melodic black metal background, so...
Yeah, a little bit mechanistic.
A little bit, more doomy though. But anyway, your record is going to be the first, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just trying to help us keep our cult quotient up here. We're going to do Irae, Lurking in the Depths.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Irae. I don't know. I just mangled it.
Irae. I've been pronouncing it like Irae.
That's probably not right. I don't think there's a long I in Latin.
Okay.
But Lurking in the Depths, and that's out on Signal Rex. So here, I'll do the background more in a little minute, but it's Portuguese black metal. Signal Rex is a really good Portuguese label that's done a lot over the last, 5 years.
Yeah.
All right, and what are your picks?
So we got 3 records on my end today. The first one is going to be I'm in a Coffin with Waste of Skin. This is an independent release, the band's second record, the first one being a very controversial, depressive black metal record from back in 2008. So that'll be interesting. After that, for our kind of mainstream slot, I guess, is...
Oh yeah, This is a weirdly mainstream show today.
Yeah. Not just for this one.
Yeah. We've just got one. Yeah, this is the mainstream slot.
Because last episode we had Gravedigger, and now we've got...
Yeah, no, this. I thought you... Yeah, I think third, if we're going to have a mainstream album in, always third slot.
Yeah. So this time we've got the self-titled new record from The Ghost Inside, a Californian melodic metalcore band, and that was released on Epitaph. You were talking about Napalm last time. Did you ever think we'd have an Epitaph record?
Gods, no. Also, melodic metalcore is really putting it very kindly.
We'll get into that.
It'll
work for now.
Yeah.
And our final record is... probably unknown to everyone listening. This is a band called Basic Torture Procedure with their first record, Domination Through Torture. This is a sort of D-beat goregrind band from Texas, and I just found these guys by seeing the newest added bands on Metal Archive, so I thought the name was interesting and listened to the record, and I enjoyed it a lot, so I was like, hey, let's give them a little attention.
Yeah, so we'll close out the segment with some more raw underground shit again.
And we'll be able to talk about how these guys, if you listen to the last episode, we were talking about kind of the history of melodic Swedish grind. This is the fork in the road, a history of kind of crusty gore grind, also from Sweden. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that.
And man, if we've got a through line today, I gotta say, I'm in a Coffin, listening to The Ghost Inside and then I'm in a Coffin, by the end, I was ready to, drive my dad's car off a bridge. That's some serious angst. So we've got...
Angsty, but also, maligned styles of metal, on my side, at least.
Yeah. I think everything you're doing is sort of marginal metal, right?
Yeah, you got depressive black metal, you've got metalcore, and then you've got, obnoxious gore grind. Yeah.
Yeah. Forbidden riffs.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let's get into it
yeah.
with my strictly normative riffs.
Exactly. So Irae, lurking in the depths. Let's talk about this band for a little bit, because we both have like a little bit of background knowledge about them.
Yeah, we put the pieces together. So you were familiar with them back in the day, right?
Yeah, I think I listened to the very first Irae record and a couple of their EPs back in the early to mid 2000s. That's when they were released. I think I got to them a little bit later. And back then, I will say it was considerably different than this record, because they played a very, what I think of as a conventional style of Portuguese raw black metal. Very ripping, very simple, just high distortion, everything clipped on the master channel of the mixing.
Just sort of nasty and dissonant. I've listened to a little of it.
Yeah. Records like Terror 666 and everything. just as extreme as the title would tell you. And I didn't find them particularly interesting, but I appreciated the spirit. So what's your
It was
experience?
sort of like a good version of the Burr's Throne thing that was big in the early 2000s, right?
A little bit.
Obviously, this band's more heavy
blasting.
on the Mayhem. Yeah.
And what's your experience?
So, I just know of Irae as part of this constellation of Portuguese bands. The other week we were talking about what good circles there are aside from Finland now, and I was saying Netherlands and Belgium is really strong. Mm-hmm. But I definitely also have to put Portugal up there. So Portugal's hot right now for sure. Probably the most popular band would be Black Silis or Silisa, which you like a lot, right?
I think we've argued about the pronunciation like on
Who
a couple
cares?
episodes.
Yeah.
No, I do love that band, but I wouldn't say they're that they're typical for the Portuguese sound.
I would say that's an older sound. So you're used to an older Portuguese sound, which is more sort of abrasive raw black metal. Mm-hmm. The stuff that's big now, which are I think semi-related bands, have more of the kind of Sargeisty kind of melodic chorded black metal stuff that we've talked about, but it's a very specific take on it.
I would say that the definitive Portuguese black metal band, apart from Black Silis, being very popular and very established now, would be Corpus Christi, who I don't know if you're familiar with.
No.
They're very traditional, ripping, second wave inspired black metal. Their production has gotten better over the years, but as far as normative black metal that's just executed with a lot of ferocity and heart, I think they're a really excellent band.
Word. So yeah, I think the other bands that I'm thinking of, so Black Silis is probably the most popular and most out there or wacky, right? But Owl's Blood was also really big. I think they only released one and still have only released one. Owl's Blood is just hyper melodic, really passionate and full of yearning. You would love that album.
Yeah, that sounds up my alley.
Yeah, Owl's Blood is sick, and somebody who's in Owl's Blood, I can't remember whether it's Owl's Blood is one or two guys, but also plays in Ostatz, and Ostatz is a little more nuanced, it's not just like full throttle epic the whole time. It sort of moves through these different shades, but it's all very finely modulated. So you'll occasionally have some very storming black metal parts, but there's a lot of, and you'll often have very beautiful or dark melodic parts, but in between there's all this kind of interesting nuances of shading, kind of weird major key elements, kind of a capital R romantic compositional feel. Not like he's writing fucking symphonies or something, but like he listens to them.
Just sort of a more dynamic, varied output.
Yeah, using the very basic sort of sliding Satanic Warmaster, Sargeist power chord, modified power chord kind of riffing to make really sort of beautiful layered stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think if there was a feeling I associate that also is a raw edge. If there's a feeling I'd associate with this kind of newer Portuguese BM, I'd say it's sort of misty. And this new Irae record, unlike their older stuff, I think really fits into that. It has this kind of, if there's, Portugal is a mountainous country, it's near the coast, it's, it's sort of cooler. I think it's a little colder there from what I remember vaguely than it is right on the Mediterranean or whatever.
Yeah.
It's on, more on the Atlantic. And one can imagine that it's probably pretty misty up there in the mountains. I'd say that's the Portuguese vibe right now, at least.
And worthy of mention, before we get into the album itself, this is a one-man project by Vulturius, who has a long track record in the Portuguese black metal scene. He's in a bunch of bands, or has been in a bunch of bands, including some that I really love, like primarily Morte and Candescente, who are a band that I have been a tremendous fan of for over 10 years now, and I think are extremely underrated.
Is that DSBM or something?
No, I would describe...
It's DSBM name.
It's a DSBM name, but it's sort of just like... I believe they have a song title called Skull Crushing Black Metal.
Cool.
So just like ripping and heavy, but with a sort of unique, almost like dungeon atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's real dark and murky, but still intense and heavy. It's as close as black metal gets to kind of headbanging mosh music as you can get.
Oh, I'd like that.
They're excellent. Their first couple records, especially their first one, Your Funeral, it's called, is absolutely outstanding. Highly recommended.
Yeah. By the way, listeners, if you hear a random clap at any time, there's an annoying fruit fly.
I was going to ask you what that was.
Yeah, and everyone, the forces of Nurgle must be destroyed. So, fucking flamethrowers to the front. So this is... So what I like about this album is I guess I'd say it's a hard album to sample. I think it has a really nice sound in general. It's sort of spacious and strange, and all of the instruments have a kind of, there's nothing really...
Let me know when you get them.
Yeah, it's a weird angle. But there's an interesting mix to it, which we'll hear in a second. And the songs have this kind of really lengthwise quality. They're very horizontal. You're not going to get a lot of drama in any particular riff, which is what you're going to focus on. But I think there's a more than the sum of its parts thing going on, where it's just very, God, I hate to be that guy, but it's very atmospheric. And it has a lot of kind of harsher, darker riffs without breaking that feel in the way that on this show, we call interrupting Dark Throne riffs, right?
Exactly.
Which some bands do. So as far as the sort of like, yeah. So I think it spans a full spectrum of black metal feelings, and it does so with a very limited vocabulary, which is always something I like little small modifications based on certain kinds of stock riffs. I argued that with the Azaf album last time, or a couple times ago on our third episode. It's very lengthwise, immersive, atmospheric music. Let's try I think the sample I picked first would work well to show a default sound.
That'll provide context. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So this is going to be off Nightshade.
The middle of Nightshade.
What was that?
I always said the middle of Nightshade.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is off the opening track, Nightshade, so let's just give that a listen so we can get some context.
So that's a pretty good example of, I think, what this band what this band sounds like when he's blasting in the more kind of melodic or atmospheric mode. Mm-hmm. The way I hear this, there's obviously that first riff is very mysterious, right? Really, really mayhem. Yeah. Also reminds me a lot of some of the songs off the middle of Bellis, like Glemselen's Elf. Yeah. And what I like about it is really cliche, the sort of part, but he's got this nice changing power chord thing under it. And it shifts from the standard Mayhem dark tonality to a bit of a more epic tonality halfway through the riff. We've been talking a lot about sort of hybrid riffing. Yeah. I think that does it in a nice sort of subtle way that changes the overall feel, gives it a bit more of a barbaric vibe. Gotcha. And then when it dies away for a second, and then we enter into this thing that has very Portuguese riff that reminds me a lot of Os Dots, which is this kind of da, 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 sort of minimal motion on the fretboard, just these sort of slightly lifting chords that produces a very kind of, I'd say, powerful consonant sound. And I really like the keyboards over it, which I think there sounds like a flute. There's a nice kind of hazy, indistinct quality, or drony quality almost to the keys in the back that I think helps make this. Yeah. So,
is this where I get into my argument?
You have some reservations.
I really dislike this album, like kind of a surprising amount. Like, I find this record just sort of intensely boring in a way because the musical vocabulary is so limited in what's going on. I've got examples.
Says the guy who picked a D-beat goregrind album.
At least it's exciting. God damn.
Although, actually, they've got, you could probably name 5 kinds of riffs on that one, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean...
What was your riff count on this record?
There's 3 riffs. There's 3 riffs on this record. But real quick, so one issue, and this is a little bit, lateral, but I really dislike the guitar tone on this record. It just, I guess it's distorted, but it conveys like none of the energy or intensity of a distorted electric guitar. It's just like sitting there in the same sonic space as the keyboards, and it gives it this, gives us this very apathetic quality. But that's not my primary issue with the record. Really, it comes down to what Irae is doing is so limited, so intensely, and probably by design limited, that there's no motion to the songs. There's no progression through ideas. It's very flat. And I know you were saying that was part of the appeal for you, but I feel like there's just people who have done that idea better. And I'll get into who I think is the alternative to this band later on.
I think that's not, again, it's not a crazy thing to say, right? I think it is true, and, to your point, that you could probably take any one section of any one song and put it in a different song, and it'd sound fine.
Yeah.
It's got this kind of, you could say episodic, but there's no real overall plot. Maybe a good thing would be it's very spatial music, right? We use the word atmospheric to mean all sorts of things, right? Yeah. Right. And in some sense, we've talked before, and probably we'll talk again, about how annoying it is that people have the concept of atmospheric black metal.
Yeah. No, it doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
The whole damn genre. But, so spatial. This is it's very foresty music, I think. It's a lot.
It definitely does sound like wandering in the forest.
Yeah, it's a lot darker. One reason I like it, it's a lot darker and more aggressive than a lot of foresty black metal. Some of which can be very sweet sounding and cool. Some of which very sweet sounding and bad.
Yeah.
And it has a ancient, misty, dark fantasy vibe that I enjoy. And but it is true that if you're listening to it for, throwing the claw fist toward the moon, this is not the first thing I'd reach for, right?
So I appreciate what you're saying, but I think one of my issues is that I don't necessarily mind a record that is based on a limited palette of musical ideas. But one of the issues that I have is that the palette seems extremely derivative to me on a riff by riff basis. So here's an example of this. This is from later on the album. This is a track called Calor, Fome y Doenças, something along the lines of that.
That was beautiful.
Oh yeah, I'm a real fucking hero. All right, so let's just listen to like the first half minute of this, and I'll talk about it a little bit.
All right.
Okay, so it seems very transparently obvious to me that that is a. I was going to describe this as the buried by time and dust riff in terms of technique, not sound, because this is something that Irae goes back to over and over again, which is a simple note sequence repeated half a step up, one semitone up, which is the important element to the main riff on Buried by Time and Dust by Mayhem. And it's a technique that Mayhem uses all the time, and it's a technique that black metal uses all the time. But the problem is, the root notes before the half-step variation are just not that interesting. This is a very formative, I picked up a guitar, I want to play black metal, let's try making a riff sort of thing.
Well, what about, so if we went for the first 30 seconds, what about that sort of, weird kind of inverted dissonant arpeggio riff that comes in at the end?
Yeah, well, that would still be reminiscent of Norway, but it would be a few years later with, I want to say it's a little bit like something you'd hear from Toulouse or...
if you wanted to compare it to any of the big bands, it'd be like, Natasha in Eternal Slumber.
Oh,
right?
No, but there's much more dark throny riffs on this record than that.
That's true. I like that riff, basically.
There is a lot of Under a Funeral Moon by Dark Throne on this record.
And I do like that album.
I love that. That's my favorite Dark Throne record.
Yes, that is clearly the best Dark Throne album.
Yeah, but at the same time, we can't just fucking lift those ideas and make a record out of them and then expect to be impressed. Although it's true that I think one thing I like about this, right? This is not going to be an album I come back to all the time, probably. Although I think I probably will listen to it a lot in a playlist with something like Ostad for certain kinds of stuff. But I think there aren't a lot of, this isn't as big a sound right now. And so it kind of fills in this unoccupied spot in the moment. We do have a lot of strict second wave revivalism, which I actually am, for the most part, very happy about, because a lot of the time it's people sort of revisiting and working in a craftsman-like way with canonical sounds. But a lot of it is strangely, and in a cool way, kind of either emperor worship or Swedish melodic worship or whatever. Yeah,
right?
I get what you mean.
And this is kind of more on the gnarly and sort of necro side of the early black metal. And it's interesting to hear those more sort of wonky tonalities and unpleasant qualities employed in this way and employed now.
Yeah,
at a time when it's like deliberately out of step in a way I find refreshing.
This is not a situation where my issue is necessarily, as we call it, the interrupting Dark Throne riff. Because I would say for the most part, the record is pretty consonant in terms of being sort of ugly and necro. I would say this is an advanced modern version in terms of structure of the sort of sounds you would hear on Death Crush by Mayhem. There's more elaborate stuff going on. I would say that one of the things this reminded me of a lot was Furze. You ever listen to them?
God, I picked up a 7-inch in a store a while ago and looked at it and then put it back because it cost too much.
Well,
or an EP. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, Fursay was, he started doing his shit in, like, the late 90s, early 2000s, and I could get into a whole discussion about how I think that one of the...
I think it's Furs, by the way.
Yeah, probably. That one of the big influences, that one of the hidden influences of most modern black metal, including, like, orthodox stuff, was the Thorns record. And
oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, that second riff there reminded me a lot of something that would be on, like, the Thorns record, but that has a whole different presentation, and I really love that record. But let's get on to something that's a little bit more melodically consonant that you have.
So this to me is, I think this was maybe the most striking moment on the record for me, and then the way they develop this idea over the rest of the song.
Yeah.
This is the imaginatively named track, A Blaze in the Mist. It's a mashup. But it has this quality I was talking about at the beginning of this kind of mingled major-minor tonality, interesting shifts in intervals, and this kind of lilting romantic vibe that produces it's an in-between mood that is more nuanced and unusual than the kind of stuff you normally get. And I think this is characteristic of this band and also some of the more interesting Portuguese stuff.
Gotcha. So let's give this a listen. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm very interested to hear why you think that's such an interesting part. You know,
I mean, I think it's the rest of the song develops off of that, but I really like the shift in the stability in the root note and the shift in the bass tone on the beginning of the riff. I like a lot. I like the little sort of slide up at the end. It also, I realized, until that last note, sounds a hell of a lot like Lord of the Rings soundtrack. Which, maybe that's in there subconsciously for me, biasing me. But I think, I like that it takes its time, and I think that excerpt does a good job of showing the kind of weird and spacious, gloomy sound on this album.
Okay, I can understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and you can hear, I mean, I almost find the instrumental parts where you can just listen to the tones resonate more interesting than the parts where the vocals are.
I will say one of the issues I take is I don't like the vocal. I've never liked the post-process distorted black metal vocals. That sort of became a big thing with shit like Leviathan and Zaster back in the day.
Yeah, it's and I'll complain about that when we get to the grindcore. But it's but I think I really like the sound quality to this. Basically, I think I even like the guitar tone that you don't like very much. The sort of organic sound on the drums. There's lots of cool. I like how the double bass sounds here, and like he uses toms in a cool way.
All of it's very cloudy.
I don't know. Yeah, it's cloudy, and it's resonant, and it's sort of alive in the way he's playing it.
Well, it's good that you chose this because, well, I'm not going to play it, but actually the part after this is one of the few moments that I do enjoy on this record where they introduce I think it's like sort of a piano melody going over the top of stuff, and it's dynamic in a way that most of the rest of the record isn't. But I would say, like, back up front, I said there's like 3 riffs on this record. We heard one of them with like the Mayhem riff, that ascending semitone thing. And this is the second one, which I would say comes from something like a Ruins of Beverast early on, those blocky, large chord shapes that build tension because they're just very long and droning. Which I guess...
It's like the Ruins of Beverast.
What was that?
It's like the Ruins of Beverast for sure. Would you say it comes from that?
I don't know if it comes from that, but that was the immediate thing I thought. And my issue is Ruins of Everast is coming from a place that's clearly... I think we can all agree that they're like a really amazing project.
He's light years better compositionally.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's like he's able to pull off some of those incredibly minimal blocks because his level of composition is just so advanced, and I don't think that's not the same situation here.
Yeah, it's true that in a Ruins of Beverast record, you would have a context that develops the kind of neoclassical vibe in this riff or whatever. Yeah. You know what, man? Honestly, I also think if you listen to some of those Ostats records, you'd understand more, which I think you'd like better than this.
Yeah, I might.
I think you'd understand why I like this more than you do. Maybe we agree that A Blaze in the Mist is the strongest song.
Probably.
And then you wanted to, there's one more?
Yeah, there's just one more, and this is just my illustration of the last riff on the record. And this is what I call the Dark Throne riff. So this is off a track called Encurralado. So let's give that a try. Yeah, so that is very clearly... I'm not sure exactly which track it is, but I believe that is pulled directly from Under a Funeral Moon.
I don't remember it, but it sounds like that. It also sounds like it could be on Blaze in the Northern Sky.
It could also be on Death Crush. It could be on
it would be on Blaze in the Northern Sky. It'd be fuzzier and picked faster, so it'd be harder to hear. But yeah.
But that's that's really what it all comes down to. Is just there's a limited variety of ideas going on, and all of them seem very directly plucked from something else. So I wouldn't mind if it was even like a variation or a tribute, but there's just a very limited range of things going on this record. I think that's what frustrated me so much.
Yeah, I get that. I think I hear it as aesthetic discipline.
Okay.
I'm going to compose with this few elements that I know I could write something different from this, but this is what this album's going to be, and I'm going to see what I can do with this very limited number of mechanics.
Yeah.
Now, do I think, there are different ways you could approach that experiment, right? Yeah. I think what was being gone for here was a kind of, this kind of immersive sound where none of the particular riffs is even very distracting from the effect of the whole.
I get that.
Yeah, but, I also understand the reservations about the riffing. So, I think you thought we were going to disagree more than ever, but I think, it's like you have reasonable objections, right?
I think it's just a difference in perspective of what we're looking for from a black metal record.
Yeah, I also have a very high tolerance for shit like this, right?
Sort of like I have a much higher tolerance for like shitty death metal than you do.
Yeah, or like slam or whatever, right?
But one thing that I wanted to say was I think the
I need more of this, right? So when I get out, okay, good, I'll put this in my playlist, right?
I think for me though, kind of hearkening back to, I think it was like our first or second episode, I think a better version of this is actually Stryborg,
who I've never heard.
Yeah, we talked about that, but Stryborg uses a very similar palette of these super minimal ideas, but he takes the weirdness and the hermeticism of it further. Mm-hmm. And he's also kind of adjoining it with actually like well-composed dark ambient music. And I just think it conveys similar ideas of sort of like naturalistic isolation better.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have to check it out. Oh, also, speaking of extremely minimal Portuguese stuff, something that came out a couple months ago was Armnatt. Armnatt, which I assume means weapon knight, but who knows? This is a Portuguese band. It looks like they've done some stuff back in 2013 and 14, but Dense Fog, again, The Mist, is the first thing they put out in a while. And I would highly recommend this to anyone who likes extremely primitive black metal. It's kind of like the Ildjarn stuff.
Yeah.
It's like I-beat stuff, but it doesn't have the sort of neurotic Ildjarn worship. Yeah. And it has a bit more of a just and it's also like really good Darkthrone power chord stuff. It has a really just, if you really like the last 3 tracks off of Under a Funeral Moon, which are just like 2 or 3 riffs each and just extremely rigorous, this is like that, but with kind of short propulsive songs and just relentless. You know, you know, it's
now just do that for another hour and a half. The podcast is done.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So okay. I don't resent this record in any way, but I think this is just a case where I think this is sort of the most divided we've been.
I think that's right. Yeah.
But I think that's simply a matter of what we look for being very different.
Yeah.
So let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with something a little bit different. All right. So next up, we have I'm in a Coffin, and I think you were unfamiliar with these guys until I brought it up.
Absolutely, yeah. My DSBM is very patchy.
It's probably for the best.
Yeah.
So for some background, I'm in a Coffin are a depressive black metal band who are originally from Texas. And the members, it's a 2-member project. They're split now between Texas and Massachusetts, I think. They did one record called One Final Action back in 2008 that was sort of controversial in a way because it's extremely different from most depressive black metal. I described it to my co-host as songs that don't progress so much as pool under your feet. There's a very strange sort of raw production, very bass heavy, and songs that are directionless, but in a sort of a good way, I think. You know, I feel like a hypocrite after what I was lambasting Irae for, but
different kind of music.
Different kind of music. And now, all of a sudden, sort of out of nowhere, after what the band describes as many false starts, because there were a lot of rumors of I'm in a Coffin coming back, they have released their second album called Waste of Skin. And
you could imagine that if you were in a DSBM band, there might be some crises of motivation.
It's sort of like funeral doom bands that'll spend 10 years between records, stuff like that. So, since this is all new to you, what did you think of this record? I believe you're feeling pretty positive about it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it should almost go without saying that the name of the band is hilarious, but I think also
by which you mean awesome.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. It conveys the sort of uncomfortably miserable quality that you like about this record, about this band in general, right? Yeah. Yes. And it's, so it's disarming in that sense. Yeah, I think I liked it a lot. I think, first of all, it sounds more like a real band than most DSBM bands, and that's because it has twice as many members as most of them.
Totally fair.
Yeah, amazing.
I do love a lot of the, like, one-man, just, like, single-minded DSBM, but this has a different vibe as a result.
Yeah, it does. It sounds a little bit bigger, a little more ambitious, and there's just a little more room in terms of ideas, because you got 2 people.
Exactly.
I think I was surprised. It's certainly, a lot of DSBM, right, could be classed as a more extreme alternative to emo or goth music. Mm-hmm. Usually one of the two, right? Your Life Lover is more of a goth kind of band. Your, I don't know what would be more closely analogous to emo per se.
Oh, probably a lot of the post-black stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this sort of, it has a gothy quality, but I think it really has like a gothy quality of Doom Death or something.
Yeah, and that was something we both noticed, was there's a substantial, and I will say, as someone who has experience with the previous record, this is very new. This intrusion of sort of old school Peaceville Doom Death in mood, if not execution.
Although this also does have an extremely emo quality to it, which I'm fine with. Like that's... Yeah. And that's part of developing it. That's one way to do distinctively American black metal, is to have that kind of bleak suburban cordage. So do we want to do like a Peaceville Doom kind of part?
Well, yeah, let's just go with, let's see what you've got for the first one. Yeah, I think that's a fair first section off Ending Soon Now.
All right.
So let's just give that a try real quick.
Yes.
Away to warm and burning. Even razor still, its job complete. Waste of bone to flesh. No.
Yeah, so I think I
was doing the full body sort of screamo lean, you know.
Yeah. Like, I think that the Peaceville is very distinct there because of those sort of spoken word vocals, which sound like something off My Dying Bride.
And just the sort of dum da da dum 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 dum.
Yeah.
It's almost like a breakdown, right?
Yeah, in a sense. There's an effect to this music. Well, just for my overall impressions, I enjoy this record, but for disclosure to fans of this, for the most part, on this podcast, I listen to these records once or twice, maybe 3 times at a stretch, because I think I get the idea. This is an occasion where I think, man, to really process everything that's going on here, I think I'd need to put in like a good 5 listens, because there's a sort of pastiche of influences going on, and there's a lot of dynamic ideas. The songs have very distinct personalities. So I do enjoy it, but it's definitely a kind of tough listen, if that makes sense.
I quite enjoyed it. I don't know I'll ever listen to it again because I just don't want to spend a day lying in bed. I know this a little too well.
Oh no, I will say,
as you do too, right?
Oh yeah, I will say I'm in a Coffin. Well, I would say that I'm in a Coffin is more directly than most of these types of DSBM bands descended from stuff like Silencer, who have a very intimate understanding of just pure human depression and misery. Now, there's parts of this record that are a little more romantic than their first record, and definitely more, there's a self-conscious quality to it where they kind of understand the absurdity of it, but they fold that back into the bitterness that lies at the core of it. And I think it's an emotionally dynamic and interesting, depressive black metal record.
Yeah, there's irony. They play irony in the same way that Life Lover does, right?
Like they get a sense of how, like, living the lives they do, because you have to imagine there's a 12-year gap between this album and the last.
I'm amazed they survived. Right? Both of them.
Well,
like, that's great. I mean, good for them, right?
No, yeah,
You know?
exactly. I don't know. Have you, for prep, did you listen to any samples off the original or anything? I'm not.
I still haven't, but you've said I trust you when you say that it's insane.
It's, yeah. So the first record has a sense of being very, like, a deeply disturbed teenagers making this music. And then now this has a sense of 12 years later being guys probably in their early 30s like us, who broke through that wall, who survived the worst of it, but still feel a lot of the same feelings. And there's something that I connect to there.
Yeah. And they're able to look back on it. Yeah, they're able to look back on it not as something I'm over, but as something that they can they can put themselves back in that headspace and, understand whatever it is they understood about the world in those moods, right?
Exactly. So here's an example of sort of similar to yours. This is a track called Slave to My Skin. And let's just play that and I'll talk a little bit about the influences that I detect there.
All right, cool.
Oh man, I fucking love that section.
Yeah, that's rough, man.
Yeah, it's there's so much going on there. One, I love how so many voices are, like, instrumental and vocal voices are intersecting there. The intruding piano line alongside the bass and guitar textures and those wailing, incoherent vocals. And
the switch from fry to actual tone in the vocals is jarring and sort of, it's one of those things where you're at first like, this is, right, it strikes you in a metal context, right? You're like, oh, that's like ridiculous. But then you're like, that's like extremely naked and hysterical.
Yeah, and right? I think the best, there is, honestly, I was thinking about this when I was listening to it.
And honestly, the second time I heard it, it just scanned as really heavy.
Exactly, because that has a similar kind of breakdown quality to your sample, your first one. So I was saying, I was about to say, there is a real technique to those sort of, I remember back in the day we called it suicidal black metal. Do you remember those days before it was codified? To that technique, because I've done those styles of vocals before in like one or two projects of mine back in the day. And it's very difficult to get that unhinged quality. It requires you to forget everything you know about black metal vocals and just scream. And to let it break and to let it bleed through. And there's a certain sort of courage it takes to do that, because it doesn't sound cool. It doesn't sound, it doesn't sound conventionally metal because it's so weak and pathetic. And that was something I went back and forth a lot on this record, were the vocals, because sometimes they're almost too ridiculous. But then if you give yourself to the record, it really works. There's a suspension of disbelief necessary for this record.
And I think that's a perfectly fair thing to ask from listeners, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are going to be a lot of people who won't be able to make that leap, and fair enough.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, fair enough. But if this is supposed to be sort of desperate and demanding music, right? And part of the thing, parts of this record are just kind of like sullen, gloomy, slow emo, right?
Yeah,
again,
definitely.
It sounds good, right? But, there are these sort of transcendent moments that make it more than that. And some of it has to do with that crushing quality in parts, and some with these unhinged vocals. I say just take it for what it's worth. If you like black metal, And if you're used to listening to underground stuff, you should be ready for an eccentric vocal.
Like imagine, it's funny you were talking about the crushing quality. Imagine if we had like a full-fledged, I mean, I'm sure these guys were just doing this by email and piecing it together as they went. Imagine
it says they recorded it in Salem, so maybe they traveled.
Maybe. But imagine if they had like a crushing like Godflesh bass presence to this. Ooh. How fucking sick it would be.
Yeah.
But I was going to say some of the influences.
Can you play bass? Maybe you should get in touch with them. Right?
Yeah, I should, really. But some of the influences I detected here were obviously the Peaceville Doom Death, Life Lover very substantially, and a certain streak of just like straight pop rock. And I said in our notes that I think the backing chords of that section are literally the chords from Weezer's Say It Ain't So, that da da.
Oh god.
Da da. You know? And it's
that is a good song.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's a great song. I love old Weezer. But I think these are guys who have learned from how depressive black metal as we understand it has changed over the past 12 years. So there's definitely incorporation of kind of the post-metal, like depressive black metal stuff. There's incorporations of these more mainstream ideas, and they haven't shied away from that, and I think that's kind of cool. So my next sample, this is kind of the closest instance to stuff off the first record, which was very idiosyncratic and very strange in the best way. And this is a track called Dust Spirit. So let's listen to this sample here. So yeah, that is probably, in terms of the whole record, the closest they come to the just intensely weird quality of the first record. Like, just the idea of doing that, like, folk-strummed clean guitar against the...
Oh, I loved that.
That's so cool. It's so different. Because imagine the courage it takes to do something like that. Just the clean guitar against the really aggressive drums and the absurd vocals. I love that.
I find that actually didn't even seem absurd to me. I'm trying to think of something. There's something I was listening to recently that has a similar kind of rolling, clean guitar sound to it. But what I really like, I mean, I harp again and again in this show on like how can you play guitar physically and expressively in a way that breaks with the I can trem at like 250 BPM kind of thing, right? The pulses in the, it's like 3/4 trem there or 6/8 trem. I think 3/4, right? And it's pulsed in this really cool way. And I love that it sounds like a real string instrument, like a mandolin. And you know what it sounds like? Got my cool reference for the day. It sounds like And Also the Trees, who are if any of you are into goth, and I don't mean, I don't mean Marilyn Manson or The Cure, like, although
both of which I love.
Both of which we like, yeah. But like, there were a sort of later 80s English goth band that took goth with a capital G. They were really into like romantic and Victorian poetry. They wore frilly collars. And the music was at times maybe even a little self-serious, but really beautiful lyrics. And the guitar playing is like proto-black metal. A lot of stuff that's in black metal is already kind of present there at mid-tempo. And they have this watery mandolin-picked sound. They said they wanted it to sound like a mandolin.
Yeah.
So I really like that part. And if there's any other thing this reminds me of, and this is pulling from my really shallow or scattered well of DSBM, do you know Kaltatod?
Haltetod. That sounds familiar, but I don't think I've listened to it.
Yeah, so they're technically probably DSBM, but they're German, and so the Germans make even DSBM sound like Ride of the Valkyries, right? Yeah. So it's very aggressive, noble DSBM, right? It could just be, sort of sad Vikings.
I gotcha.
But it's
Well, that's sick that their name means death by freezing. That's so dope.
It's just actually really beautiful melodic black metal, and it has kinds of lifts. It has chord shapes kind of like this, like that lovely lift in this. Anyway, let's go on. We got one more.
Yeah, we've got one more sample from you. So talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Honestly, all of our samples sounded kind of the same because I think have similar events in them, because I think this album has these kinds of blocks of really cool sound.
I will say this is not a depressive black metal album where a song is one riff for 11 minutes. There's a lot of dynamics in these tracks.
But I think we're all drawn to these. We've all picked different variations on this certain kind of climax moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here is from Life Never Was, and this starts on a little bit of a different note, but has that same kind of guitar playing.
Okay, let's give it a try. Yeah, that's one of the most traditional black metal parts on the record.
Yeah, I mean, that whole thing. Yeah, that first part, right? Is it the only use of blast beats on the record?
I think there's maybe one or two more, but they're in that same vein of those drony riffs. And there's something about that chording that's familiar to me. That's taken from something, but I'm not exactly sure what.
It's, what I wrote in the notes here was always good to know that a weird band can write a solid, simple black metal riff.
Yeah.
Like, it's something I look for almost when I hear something that has a kind of offbeat sound.
Because it tells you they're not just a gimmick, that they really have chops,
Yes. Yeah. It's like, and that they really, I mean, with these guys, you could tell they really like the music, but with some other bands, if you hear something that's kind of arty or whatever, I just want to hear one sick trem riff, right?
Yeah.
So that's a nice, simple black metal riff. And then the thing that comes after, again, just this building, crushing, breakdowny thing. I was headbanging from my waist again. And the harpsichord at the end fucking kills it. Did you hear that?
Oh, yeah. No, that's great.
So, I mean, if there's
bringing back that peaceful doom death quality.
Yeah. Yes, the peaceful, the dead can dance, and it relates to the mandolini thing. It makes it sound, this part just, on Bandcamp, they've got their picture in front of a Baphomet or whatever.
Yeah.
And if some of their music sounds much more sort of, like, not in a bad sense, pathetic, pathos, vulnerable, sort of dealing with the raw weakness of depression than other black metal or than other DSBM, this part and some other parts on this record sound much more sort of muscular and sort of satanic. This part's like pretty fucking satanic. Right?
Well, I think that because this is something I actually wanted to talk about, was the overall structure of this record. Like, supposedly, based on what they say, this album was recorded over the course of like 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
So the one downside of this record, I would say, is there is a kind of hodgepodge quality to it.
I hear that.
But there are elements that almost bring it together. Like I'm a big fan of samples, and I think the sampling they do, like the very first track opens with that Blade Runner sample that I think is a great idea, and it kind of shows. I could go into this, but it's interesting because it's a sample from Blade Runner talking to one of the replicants about how her memories are fake. Yeah. And that was a really interesting sort of thesis statement for the record.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like,
oh, yeah.
Maybe we're 12 years older, but it turns out everything we were doing in that time, our survival was bullshit. And then you get to the end of Life Never Was, which is the final track where he's just ranting about how you should kill yourself. Which is absurd, but also perfect for the record. I think there's
sort of a regressive quality to it.
Yeah, it's definitely going back to the original.
And the last track is by far the darkest.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one we just sampled from.
Because the very first track has some very sort of uplifting Life Lover style post-metal riffs on it.
Yeah.
And it just gets darker as it goes. But I think that this record might need a thread. Like on some of the tracks you'll hear like a sample of like rainfall that comes in and out, and I almost wish that was kind of underpinning all the transitions between tracks, just to do that little bit more to thread the whole story together. You know what I mean? This is definitely nitpicking, but...
It is nitpicking, but I mean, I hear that, but if there's a positive to it, it's the biographical quality, right? It's like, and it's that none of these are their B riffs, right?
Yeah.
This was carefully selected for, and you can sort of, who knows whether the first thing or the last thing was written first?
Yeah.
But it has
the quality of, like, it was written in a linear order.
You can hear, that's true. Yes, it does. And you can hear a kind of sedimentary layering to it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. It's like a document as much as it is a single work of art.
It's the story of these guys. And
not in a self-conscious, like, this is my biography way, which I know I was sort of talking shit about in reference to Adraza.
Yeah.
But in a kind of, this documents what we were doing. It's like a direct trace of what they were doing.
Yeah. I guess if there's anything I could say about this record, it's cool to imagine. Obviously, I'm guessing this, but I have a feeling these guys are like the same age as us.
Yeah, I do too.
And it's cool to think that I listened to their first record in 2008 and I really got that record. Mm-hmm. And now in 2020, I'm listening to their new record and I really get this.
Yeah.
It's like there's a continuity to it that's really cool. And also,
I probably get it. I don't know what it says that I think I get it more than I would in 2008.
I will say, when you listen to this record, did you listen on Bandcamp or did you watch the YouTube stream for it?
I listened on Bandcamp.
Well,
it gave me more control over the tracks. Why? What's the stream?
Well, before it gets pulled, watch the YouTube stream where the transition between tracks involves one of the members slicing open his arm to mark which track you're on. It's 100% real, I can tell. So, 100%, there's some, like, weird visual stuff that goes on and, like, the lyrics are displayed. It's the way to... get this album. It's awesome.
Bro. Fuck.
So yeah. I'm in a Coffin, Waste of Skin. Welcome back. Hopefully it won't be another 12 years before we see you again.
Yeah, I think we both really liked this one and would love to hear more.
Definitely.
You know, I think these guys... I think if they wanted, now that they've sort of cleared their chamber of this second extraordinarily depressive statement,
they could take the momentum.
I would love to hear them write an album that was still depressive, but like carry the momentum, bring out some of that muscular quality. You could make like a dark Americana black metal album.
Oh,
that would be really cool.
This is a case where
it would be like the Murder City Devils of black metal. Like,
I think this is a case where the interruptions to the straight depressive stuff are totally to the advantage of the record as a whole. I really like how dynamic and how unusual this is.
Yeah. Imagine just a massive, doomed out, distinctively American sounding crushing BM album would be. You know?
I've kind of always wanted that, you know.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
All right, so let me take a break real quick and we'll move on. But let's talk about some more angsty shit. So, The Ghost Inside This is a band that I've actually been a fan of for a long time, even though I usually don't like kind of the scene they're coming from. And you've just got like secondhand familiarity, right?
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that, let's see, when were they active?
We're looking at late 2000s, maybe mid 2000s.
Yeah, 2004. Interesting. I mean, these are the sort. They were sort of late to the party as far as
they were. Yeah.
As far as sort of, screamo metalcore or
And they were late because they were not, and also they're from California. They were not part of the New England metalcore scene, Kill Switch, Shadows Fall, stuff like that.
Nor were they part of the Jersey emo scene. Nor were they part of the related Boston metalcore scene like Converge or HopeCon.
Just a little bit between everything.
I would say that this was at exactly the time of my life when I avoided this shit like the plague.
Oh, 100%. Right. I discovered them long after they had started.
I think I just saw this on Hoodies or whatever and was like, well...
it probably sucks.
That's not for me. Yeah. I think it's... As you played me some of their old stuff recently, and I was like, well, this is a lot tougher than I thought it'd be.
Yeah, so let's. I was actually going to say, before we get into it, let's get some context. Let's talk about the Ghost Inside as they kind of originally sounded. This is from 2010. This is a favorite song of mine. So let's listen to the first minute of Between the Lines off their record from 2010.
First minute?
Yeah, first 1 minute. Oh God, why are you typing it to me in Discord? Just say it out loud.
Jesus, these fucking breakdowns.
I actually love that first one, the sort of pre-breakdown before they get into the full one.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. Like, so this is the track that you showed me before, and, that guitar work at the beginning, that kind of light arpeggiated stuff, that's undeniable, right?
Yeah.
That's if, again, it's not, it's not, Purity by Hate Forest, it ain't. But, it's got that, it's a well done, detailed version of that New Jersey-ish, extremely suburban feel.
Yeah,
right?
This is a weird case where I'm bringing the band to you as a fan, but you probably have more context for it than I do.
True. We have the two different parts of the brain, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you really like Brand New, right?
Oh yeah, I love Brand New.
It's a little like a Brand New riff. I think to me, well, I'll get into that more when we get to this new record. But yeah, so that's, if you've ever, had a feel about a girl or your life, possibly while driving in your parents' car, right?
100% in your...
That's got to resonate.
Oh, I wouldn't even say in your parents' car, in your Honda Civic that you bought with your part-time job money. And it's clanking, but it never stops.
Your part-time job at GameStop.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I really also like, the pile-up moment after that. The sort of, the gang vocals part is really good. It comes in sooner than you'd expect. It's compressed, it hits hard, and it feels more tough, right? You can immediately see that in their prime, this would have been a great band. If you were into this vibe, this would have been a great band to see live, right?
Yeah,
if somebody had brought me to see it, I would have poo-pooed it, and then I would have had a lot of fun. Right?
There's a definite quality of tough guy meets emo, and I think that's what attracted me, was that interesting...
Tough guy meets what? You're clipping in and out a lot in this recording.
Oh, okay. Oh,
you might want to try that again, yeah. You haven't missed anything important thus far, but I really couldn't hear that word.
I'm recording on my end, so it shouldn't be a big deal. Tough guy meets emo, you know? Like...
Yeah.
Which is an interesting dichotomy that was what attracted me to this band.
Yeah, I think at its best, this stuff reminds me of, as far as things that are a little less poppy or polished, or a little closer to, like, the East Coast metalcore scene or whatever, The Carrier, which is the thing my friend got. I wasn't cool enough to know them back when I was listening to, like, stuff, like, generally in this vein, but, like, The Carrier's a great band if you're really into, you know, hardcore or, metallic hardcore or any of the other stuff we cover on this show, and you want something that scratches the emo itch, like The Carrier is very passionate, very emotive, very lots of lush, fruity guitar parts, and also just like two steps and breakdowns and all that shit.
Cool. And I'm very excited to check them out because that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, they're really good.
But so basically what's going on here, and I kind of wanted to bring this to you as an idea, is should we be listening to this sort of melodic metalcore stuff essentially as pop rock, but with an extreme aesthetic?
I mean, in this case, absolutely.
Because that's my kind of sense. Even for older Ghost Inside stuff, it strikes me essentially as pop rock, but overdriven, which is fine. You know, you can do whatever you like. But
this record definitely takes it. The new one takes it way more in that direction.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll throw in a sample of that. So here's an example of when it works. I will say I substantially prefer their older stuff. This is not great, but I kind of like this section here towards the end of a song called Overexposure. So we'll listen to this. We'll talk about it a little bit.
You tell the difference from what you want and what you deserve. When it all comes crashing down, can you back up every word you said? Yeah, we all fall down. Yeah, we all fall down. And I will relive it. Show me your best and I'll show you the difference.
So I think you're going to fucking hate
Give me
that.
a sec, I'm still finishing it. When we all fall down.
I think that's a section that works for the pop rock essence of this music. You know what I mean?
Whew, man, I don't know. It does work. It's an effective. God, I mean, fuck. We were talking about this before the show, but it's like I try. You know, you grow older, you lose your sort of teenage hang-ups about things, you come back to things and you like them better, you're like, oh yeah, this is great for what it is, whatever, right? I mean, you know, I go back and I listen to, you know, War All the Time by Thursday, like, at least once a year.
Thursday is still awesome. Fuck off.
I think I never really stopped liking them, but I might have not listened to it for a few years. But you know what I mean. Or like Thrice. I'm no longer ashamed of liking Thrice back when I was 15.
Thrice is fine. I mean,
Thrice has some sick fucking. Thrice has melodeath riffs better than the Gothenburg bands sometimes. But anyway, like, you try to be broad-minded. This reminds me of exactly how I felt, like, as a autistic teenager listening to hardcore, or in college, just being like, Jesus, oh God.
I guess the thing that I wanted to bring up with that sample is this is the Ghost Inside's like trademark thing, which are those sort of nu metal, like lingering, like overhead lead guitar lines against this sort of melodic metalcore whole. And this is so for some context for this record, because this is one of the things that makes me feel bad for shitting on. So the Ghost Inside as a band were in a horrific bus accident back in 2015.
Oh no! Fuck! Jeez!
What?
Well, now I feel bad.
No. But so it's like...
But there's no turning back.
It's fine. Like, I'm not asking you to, but it's like, maybe it provides some context for some of these more, like, emotive, uplifting things. Whole band was, like, significantly injured. The driver died. The drummer lost his right leg. And it's actually very cool to see him play because he has a setup that allows him to continue.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. No, actually, yeah. If you look at some video, they did a ton of videos in the intervening period about their physical therapy and everything. So I think that it doesn't justify, but at least explains kind of where they're coming from in certain places.
Again, there is a thing where you get older, you feel more secure about yourself. You're no longer trying to prove you're hard, and you're like, damn, I want to write some pop punk. But I feel like what these guys are nostalgic for, in a sense, is like extremely radio pop punk and emo from the early 2000s. Yeah,
I would say that one of the primary issues of this record is that unlike a lot of their old stuff, it feels like they've receded back into mid-2000s metalcore in a way that they didn't even back in the mid-2000s. They didn't sound like that. They were advancing beyond that with that sort of...
It's hard for me to even hear this as metalcore, dude. I mean,
there's
like, here, I've got a sample now. I would say that this is the heaviest part on the record. It's not,
So, The Outcast.
Yes.
All right, let's give that a shot.
Go!
Yeah, I think that's actually worse than most of the, like, pop parts of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of is. Yeah, I guess it's, what is it, Pantera meets Gent? It's...
Is
this like deathcore?
No, it's definitely not deathcore. It's just like pop metalcore taken to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, but it's definitely like post 2000, and this is sort of stuff that like happened after I went to college, basically. Like, I have no memory. Sounds like this is like that line in Meshuggah kind of thing, right?
I mean, maybe to a degree, but I don't think they're getting it from that. I think they're getting it from other metalcore bands.
Yeah, I don't know. Point being, that is certainly the darkest and heaviest part on the album, and one could not call it tasteful.
No, it's bad. I'll be the first to say that it's bad. And maybe not most, a lot of this record is bad. But... Which hurts me to say because I really like this band's older stuff. Because the issue is that they've stripped out a lot of the shit that made them unique, which were these kind of like punk-infused high-speed parts, which made them very distinct from the rest of metalcore.
Up-tempo pretty parts. You know, they have parts that sound like fast emo, and a lot of metalcore tried really hard not to sound like emo, even though it was.
But these guys kind of embraced it, and on their old stuff at least, it kind of worked. They had a sense for how to make it work naturally. But it's definitely not the case here. So let's get to your real nail in the coffin choice.
Okay. So in my note, what I write is, this is Unforgivable. And this is off the track One Choice.
Yeah, let's give this a try.
There's something left for me here, so now I'm going alone. It's all in my head, singing over and over. Right or wrong, I know I just need closure. I won't bend, I won't break through the darkest of days. I remember I survive, I don't surrender. I won't bend, I won't break through the darkest of days.
Oh, God! Oh, man. I mean, like, that's not, that even, right? That places us completely outside the realm of, like,
Oh no, that's
emo or metalcore.
that's
or,
the worst part on the album.
my God, that's
No.
just,
I remember that being very horrible.
that's
But-
an alternative rock radio chorus. It's got a fucking pre-chorus. I tried to think of what the worst parts on this record remind me of, and like the feeling in them.
Yeah.
And I don't know that this is the most accurate, but Lost Prophets. Do you remember that guy?
I get where you're coming from.
I think he eventually went to jail for
for being a
diddling kids or
pedophile.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
No,
yeah, this kind
I
of.
will say that a lot of this, like, the worst shit is restricted to the last, like, third of the record.
Which is
It's
an
very
interesting
condensed.
choice.
Yeah, it's weird. For some reason, like, the last 4 tracks are saturated with these, like, awful clean vocal parts and shit.
Oh, I know what they did. They're right. The point is that they come from a hardcore background. They need to do something for their fans who listened to them when they had this kind of still hardcore but more emotional sound.
Yeah.
And they put their fucking alternative rock tracks on the back half, but then that's what they use to get radio play. Although, I don't know, does radio exist anymore?
I don't know.
The equivalent of radio play.
Something like
you make
that,
a video, right? But geez, that's like straight flipping through the radio stations, and you're
you
stuck
hear it
because
and then you skip to the next thing.
there on the station that plays like Metallica, there's a muffler commercial, so you switch back to the alternative rock station, and then you switch it again, and then you go to the college radio station where the guy's playing bleeps and bloops for half an hour.
I mean,
right?
the only thing that I'll say really in my defense is you can hear the clear difference in, like, the older shit.
Yeah,
and I would say
boy, can you.
That's still worth checking out, but this record is basically a failure.
I would describe... Yeah, sorry to say, but yeah. I mean, we try to be balanced here, but honestly, I hate this shit. Like,
no, it's fine, dude. I shit on Irae. Although I like how both of us were, like, talking before this, and we were shitting on both these bands way harder than we do, like, on the podcast.
Yeah, you try to be nice, but honestly, like, fuck this shit. This is so lame.
Well, yeah, if we're gonna be honest, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, that Irae record, that's fucking awful. That's unlistenable.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I'm surprised you didn't say that.
I'm trying not to be a fucking dickhead, but all right. So I think that's all we need to say about the Ghost Inside.
Well, the deal is, if you offend people in an emo hardcore band, if you see them in line outside the club, they might kick your ass. Whereas, like, if you offend someone in a black metal band, he might take a plane to where you are and shoot you. Right? So,
Exactly. So with that in mind, we'll take a very brief break, and then we'll be back with the final album of the night.
All right.
Is that how we get into it's probably appropriate for the last record, isn't it?
Yeah, wait, what are we doing again? All right. Oh yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, that was more of a Lemmy, but I mean, could you burp this title for us?
Well, that's the band name, anyway.
Pretty good. Yeah.
And the record would be called
For some reason, I can only understand the name. Really, I look at it and all I see is acronyms, like BTP, DTT.
So Basic Torture Procedure, a brand new band out of Texas, playing Swedish-inspired D-beat goregrind, and I think this is kind of a style that you've really never heard before. Is that right?
No. I suppose that in the grand map of possible, in the sort of logical map of possible extreme metal configurations, this has to exist, but I didn't know it existed.
Yeah, so a Basic Torture Procedure is a 3-piece out of Texas, I believe. And they play a D-beat infused style of gore grind descending from a band such as Regurgitate. And what's your experience with them? I think that's the primary influence here.
Yeah, nope, don't know at all.
All right, so I think you were asking me the other day to just give you like a sample of Regurgitate. So you know what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So here's just me going on YouTube, picking up a song off one of their later records, which is more obviously D-beat infused. So here you go. Here's one, and just listen to the first minute of that so everyone has some context.
Oh, nice. Hot chick. Pity about the guts.
All right. This is Bleed on Me from Regurgitate's Sickening Bliss.
All right, let's go.
So yeah, that's kind of the paradigm we're working off here.
Yeah, that was extremely ripping. Good, nice, tight, simple kind of lead riffs over the D beats. Cool breakdown. The lone YouTube commenter on this says 207 is the goriest moment in history. So I suggest we show our listeners whatever that is.
Yeah, let's listen to that.
Unless it gets us like. Watch this be a sample that gets us like banned from Apple. Okay,
let's give it a try. Let's give it a try though.
Yeah. All right. Wasn't that just more blast beats?
Yeah, it was, but I think he meant like the trailing vocal effect there, which is admittedly extremely cool. So I've been meaning to ask you, this is a little bit tangential, but you've been talking about how you've talked several times on this podcast about how like the gore thing doesn't appeal to you, but why is theme so important to your listening?
I don't know. I think I'm...
Because it seems like you've got a special kind of, not resentment, but reticence towards, like, kind of gory stuff in general.
I think less so now, which is why I've been telling you it's cool that on this show you're bringing me that stuff.
Okay.
Because I get to hear it. I mean, I think for me, I've always been very invested in this. Well, like, black metal, right, is more sort of spiritual or ideological than death metal in general, right? And on
like if we're gonna say there's a division in the show, I'm the death metal guy and you're the black metal guy. That's not. Yeah, that's reductive, but yes,
extremely reductive. We have a lot of overlapping taste, but let's lean into those stereotypes for the sake of simplicity.
Yeah.
So, and I think we'll do that in the future. But like, it's, so I think and on the other side, right? Because I was listening to hardcore stuff before that, and I still do. There's a very different kind of ideological investment in that stuff, right? So you can imagine when I was more into the hardcore side of things, you can imagine me being a little bit scandalized by some of the gore themes that, I've never been a huge one for self-righteous hand-wringing, but, I think either way, right? I mean, I think especially I'm very invested in black metal as a spirit or whatever, and even though that's not how you're supposed to listen to goregrind or porno grind or whatever in the same way, it's still just like, I'm just like, well, cutting up good-looking ladies, it seems like not the right thing to do with a good-looking lady. I guess it's chivalry also. That's what it is, right? I really like black metal about fucking knights. So, the idea about like, I think it's just that, and that sort of instinctive gag factor, was bigger when I was younger. Now I'm just like, it's just sick riffs,
well, you're also not like a huge like horror movie fan like I am.
I'm not. And, but, part of it is like, okay, maybe for the average extreme metal person, maybe I'm even, it's like, well, if I'm squeamish about that shit, I should just listen to it.
Well, yeah, I think it's more to be charitable. I think it's more that you come to extreme metal from this more high-minded perspective.
Yeah,
not in a backhanded way, but I come from a much more like primeval kind of just like pure extremity perspective.
Yeah, you like disgust and another black metal death metal difference, right? Related to that sort of process versus object thing we were talking about. Mm-hmm. Death metal also has this sort of ultimate corporeality thing, right?
Yeah.
And, like this sort of just like get into the guts and viscera. We can't tell whether it's a sex thing or a death thing. It's just about like sort of, slippery, nasty things touching you. Insects biting you, shit like that. And I think there's a kind of person who finds, it's like, there's plenty of gory shit in the black metal or death metal I listen to, but it's more like battle violence or whatever, right?
Yeah, versus just like sadistic torture.
That doesn't, and there's a kind of person, right? You don't have to be a sadist to appreciate that shit, right? There's a kind of person, there's a kind of kid, this is what it is. There's a kind of kid who likes doing really gross shit in the cafeteria for people who pay him money.
That was me.
Oh, that was absolutely you. And I was almost always the kind of kid who like looked away, right? I was like, this is just fucking gross. Why are you doing this?
I was the kid who would find a thing that shouldn't be eaten and be like, I'll eat this for $1 and collect the money,
Yeah. I mean, it's like, or just like, and certain people seek out, you seek out extreme metal, right? It's seeking out certain kinds of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily by firsthand, but by like, you're fascinated by certain kinds of stuff. And there's someone who's really, there are people whose idea of extremity is this sort of extreme corporeality, extreme grossness, extreme gore, and like, the barest kind of suffering there is.
Yeah.
Or infliction of pain. And that, to me, has never quite been my thematic jam.
But I appreciate that you appreciate that, so to speak, Yeah,
I think I didn't so much when I was younger. I just didn't get it. And now I appreciate it. And that makes it easier for me to listen to it, right?
So let's listen to a quick track just to inform people. This is really good because we don't need to do samples. We just play full tracks from this record. This is the 18th track on the record, which, by the way, is a total of 27 tracks, and it's still under half an hour. This is a track called Stomach Acid Facial Corrosion. And this is just a really good example of what this record sounds like as a whole. So let's give this a try.
Whew.
That really tells you everything about the record in one track, doesn't it?
I was gonna give this record a little bit. I like this record a lot, but I was gonna give it a little bit of shit about the pitch shifted vocals.
But it works. It works, doesn't it?
I mean, honestly, I've only had one beer, slightly high ABV, but only one beer during this show. And the difference between how those vocals literally sound between when I listened to it like yesterday morning and now is incredible. I've had one beer, and now the vocals are like, hell yeah, man, that's fucking filthy.
It's party music. It's definitely party music to a degree. But I think I'm really interested in your perspective, considering this is like very new to you in general. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, my other experience with this, I realized, was some of the first really extreme music I heard outside of things like Converge was there was a really good college radio show in my town where dudes would just play. I think it was probably rotating hosts, but a lot of the stuff that they were listening to this was way back. This was in the trench coat days of extreme metal. So this was long before like cool guy, long hair, esoteric caverncore band, right?
Yeah.
They were playing fucking goregrind and like, just brutal death metal, probably suffocation type stuff. Yeah. And I would listen to it kind of, at that time, I didn't totally understand blast beats yet, or vocals like that.
So but it was pure chaos to you.
Yes, I listened to it fascinated. Like, right? Just pure fascination. Like, this is interesting. And so I remember it from that. But, I mean, to me, this is sort of like, in a way, it's like, there's all sorts of mediocre D-beat bands, right? Mm-hmm. And this is just better D-beat. Right?
I'm sure the band would be very satisfied to hear that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like, it pushes the tempo really hard. It's got nice change-ups in the, in the riffing. Again, were this my druthers, or were I trying to make this a crust band, I'd have the vocals different. But in this context, it's hilarious and awesome.
Well, right? let's talk about that for a moment, because I'm guessing you're not into like the pitch shifted vocal thing.
Well, I really like it on, say, the early Emperor stuff, like when they use it as punctuation, right? On like
versus,
Wrath of the Tyrant or whatever.
Yeah, versus like the whole thing.
Yeah, I like it as punctuation. I think that when you do it as the whole thing, and I think when you do it as the whole thing, it can sound too processed, and it can have the same problem that you have on the post-processed black metal vocals, right?
Gotcha, yeah.
And I don't think this band really has that problem on second listen, because the whole thing is just fucking raw, right?
I really like the production quality on this.
Whereas there's a lot of gore and slam stuff that's not raw at all, and where that plays into the processed quality of it. Do you see what I mean?
No, I definitely know what you mean.
I like hearing vocals that sound like, I get that some vocals have to be quieter, you've got inhales or burps or whatever, but like, I like hearing some human tone and force in it.
Yeah. I think that's what you get when you... Because as far as I know, with the goregrind guys, when they're doing the pitch shifted thing, they're doing kind of an alternation between like regular death growls and those sort of like roaring quality things.
Yeah, I like the roaring things.
Oh, that kind of shit.
That's cool.
That's sick. And
also, that sounded really good.
No, it's but that's like, that comes very directly from Last Days of Humanity, who are some of the earlier guys to do that. I mean, like, Carcass did it to a degree, but, I mean, if we're going to talk about a seminal band in this style, Last Days of Humanity are the band who really codified and transported this goregrind thing to a whole new place.
Honestly, their name sounds... we've been talking about how this is like a D-beat goregrind band, but, like...
That could be like a crust band.
It really could, yeah. They could play with like His Hero Is Gone or whatever, right?
Well, yeah, because they're coming from... Because you gotta think of like...
The name Last Days of Humanity. That's what I was saying, yeah.
But also musically, you gotta think these guys are coming from, in a lot of cases, like a punk background as well. There's...
Yeah, sure.
Like... Carcass is the origin of goregrind, as we understand it.
Yeah.
we fail to recognize that Carcass was very punk influenced in their like first couple records.
Part of the UK crust grind scene, right?
Exactly. So,
it's really like there are there's a fork in the road.
Exactly.
On one fork is a sign that says, save the animals. On the other fork is a sign that says, butcher the humans like animals.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Or have sex with animals, right? It's like...
just something, just like you get to the point where you're still into all the like punk ethos, but you've become so like jaded and nihilistic about it, and you're just like, fuck it, let's just go as insane as possible.
You still show up to the protest with your bros just because you like lighting trash cans on fire.
Exactly.
Right?
But musically for this band, for Basic Torture Procedure, I'm going to play another sample. This is off the 6th track. It's called Born in Larva. And I think this is a good example of what this band really does well.
This is my favorite track, too. I was going to pick this.
Oh, Born in Larva? Yeah, this is a really good song. So let's give that a shot. You like that drop before the blast kicks back in, right?
Oh my god, that was like, I didn't know, you just didn't realize they had... I feel like they'd been saving that one fret for that part. You know what I mean? It's like, that was low.
This is tuned like, this is probably like 8-string tuning, like down around F sharp or G sharp. Yeah.
So what I love about this song, and it recurs a lot throughout here, is what I would call the sort of like down-tuned speed metal feel. Mm-hmm. They're playing leads, right? Often really simple single string, or alternating a lead, maybe pedal pointing a little bit.
Yeah.
But like, they're sort of bendy, especially from after a minute on, right? They just lock into this rolling hyperspeed Motorhead beat and get this sort of repetitive bending and grooving leads. I really like that.
Yeah, it's kind of impressive how long they maintain that like octave bounce riff that they're doing.
I love that.
But they keep the energy there. And that's one of the reasons I want to bring up this song, is because there's a lot of ideas going on in one track. It's like we were talking about on the last episode, Basement Torture Killings, very good band, but they had a tendency to rush through ideas a little bit. Mm-hmm. This is an example of how to like really use those ideas to their fullest extent, and it's amazing.
That's the D-beat influence, also.
Yeah, there's an amazing amount of variation that will go on in these little like 1 minute to minute and a half songs. And I think I'm really impressed by these guys and their ability to just like keep it going, keep it moving, and do these small variations to keep you engaged.
Yeah, but like you said, when they get a good idea, they lock it in the way that like a crust band does. It's like there are about 2 to 3 more riffs in any of these songs than there are in your average D-beat song, right? Which usually has 3 if it's ambitious.
Yeah.
But there's the general willingness to rock out a riff relates to that.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that makes this band really cool is they've got a very good, like, intuitive sense of riffs that are stock riffs that use as, like, transitions and riffs to just, like, sit on and power through.
Mm-hmm. You know, that really repetitive one, the sort of thrashing repetitive riffs, I'm realizing, I think maybe I should just go back and listen to Strapato more. It's clearly on my mind. But I was thinking of this when we were doing Basement Torture Killings too. It's like, right, that sort of gory, willfully gross, sort of punk thrash stuff. That,
you could
it doesn't really sound...
You could also listen to Morbid Saint for that.
Yeah. But Strapato, or on Slaughter has a grinding quality to it, right? It's either hyper fast or really slow hellhammery stuff. Yeah. And when they get a riff, they lock it in. Like they have a song called The Curse that's, I think, one riff the whole time.
Well, it's Old Sodom, like circa Agent Orange will do that, where they just like lock into simple ideas and then the lead guitar will sort of vary it over the top of it. It's like, just really simple but elegant kind of construction of these ideas. But you've got a sample here.
Honestly, it's just the same shit because this is a grindcore album. But in 45 lashes of the gastrointestinal tract, is that it? Yeah.
Cool name.
That's a good name. That's wicked. So, my note is actually just to say, my note says, again, a lot happening in 1.5 minutes. Here, maybe I can play this just to emphasize those bendy leads I like. Why don't we just play it from, 59 seconds on?
All right, let's do that. Oh man, there's like, even more than the track that I played, there's an essence to that, which is really unique.
Hang on, I can't hear you over the burps. Okay, wait, here we go. Yep.
Good.
So, what were you saying was unique?
I was going to say, like, those kind of, like, bending leads, that's similar to, Born in Larva. There's an essence to this shit that is almost reminiscent of, like, Japanese D-beat, like, jism type stuff. Like, there's...
Actually, the closest thing is the vocals.
There's... But that, like, very patient elaboration over this very simple idea that you get from the lead vocals, because that's something that actually extends across this whole album, is those sorts of like lead guitar ideas, which are just like simple variations off the rhythm guitar below them. There's just like a lot of dynamic quality to this record that you wouldn't expect off a goregrind record from Texas. You know?
I really like, yeah, true. Yeah. I really like the, just the way that the flabbiness of the downtuned strings.
Oh, yeah.
You can hear the motion in the strings, and it's like, in addition to the fuzz distortion for the pedal, you're getting natural distortion from the wobbling in and out of tune. That's fucking heavy.
This is clearly like this is an album played on a 6-string guitar that should be played on an 8-string guitar, you know?
Bro, this is noise, not music.
I've got the tattoo, man. You've seen it before.
Yeah.
No, I've got a real passion for bands who do these kind of simple styles and do a simple variation just because they've got a very concentrated idea of what they want to do. And, just like all respect to bands like this.
Yes, absolutely. That's part of what we want to promote on this show, I think.
No, absolutely. And, but I think in a greater sense, what's really cool is this presents to you the opposite side of what we were talking about on our last episode. The idea of, we were talking about this kind of melodic grind idea that was established by Nazem. And now we've got the other side, which is this D-beat gore grind idea that extended well beyond Sweden and especially into places like the Netherlands that really elaborated off this substantially.
I would say if this album has a fault, it's simply that there are 27 fucking tracks on it. But that's just like, so, at least to me, listening the first time, I was started to sort of lose track about halfway through. However, who cares? It's really impressive that they got 27 tracks, and if you like it, just listen to, if you can't go through it all at once, listen to it in two sessions.
Yeah, it's definitely like, I would argue that shit like this is designed to be listened to in the sense that like ambient black metal is.
Yeah. You put it on while you're, but you don't usually listen to ambient black metal while you're drinking heavily.
I do.
yeah, maybe if you're alone, sure. It's but this is like party music, as you say.
Yeah, it's party music, and it's also attached to a much bigger legacy than a lot of people would appreciate. Because one of the things that I really appreciated about this band is the D-beat stuff is not merely the drum beats they're choosing. There's a substantial appreciation for that whole style of music, The
blown out fuzzy guitar tone, like you were saying, some of the vocal patterns. And again, I think, one reason I've not been as into the gore stuff is that paradoxically, a lot of it is very polished and clinical. Maybe because it's going for that scalpel feel, right?
Yeah, that carcass-derived feel.
Yeah, and because, for a while there, the bands were using the triggers and shit, right?
Yeah.
And this is not like that at all. This sounds like gory music. This is putting your hands in the fucking viscera, right?
You put your hands in the cold spaghetti at Halloween and they tell you it's intestines.
Yeah. You put this is music for the kid, they put your hand in the cold spaghetti and then you're like, what's that strange feeling I'm getting down below?
It's very like I like records like this because it's like it brings me back to being a teenager and discovering this music for the first time and being really excited about the potential of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds, this connects nicely to I'm in a Coffin because it's the kind of music that when you've been listening to this shit for, 10 or 15 years, it still sounds really extreme.
Yeah, no, I love the brutality.
It's easy to get jaded, right? And
I love, as you know, for me, like how single-minded it is. It's got a very distinct objective from the beginning, and that's fucking cool, man. I love that there's no like intruding influences. It's like, we're gonna do a fucking Regurgitate album that they haven't done in a while. Let's just fucking go. And then 27 songs later, there you have Basic Torture.
It's way rawer than the Regurgitate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Regurgitate had, like, they were with, like, Relapse at the end.
I was gonna say, actually, looking at the Regurgitate cover, it's, the art is really like metalcore.
Yeah, it could be, because it's similar to the first or second Bring Me the Horizon record.
Oh my god, you don't like Bring Me the Horizon.
No, I don't, but they had the same thing on like their first or second record, that like holding her organs.
Oh, really? Oh, I bet that the artist just ripped this off, like they ripped everything else off.
Something like that.
God, I remember when that band came out and I was like, well, this is the only way they could make shitty white belt metalcore worse. Would be by making a literal boy band out of it, right? Oh god.
I don't think I've ever listened to a full Bring Me the Horizon record. It was just like, I knew up front it wasn't my thing.
No, I did out of more. I watched one of the music videos out of morbid fascination, and I was like, this is, I'll keep the Horizon right over here, thanks. It's, okay. Well, I gotta go get drunk in a second. So, do we have any concluding remarks?
Fuck it, man. Let them listen to goregrind. Chill out for a while.
Yeah,
man.
chill out to some goregrind, bro.
I mean, we did 2.5 hours last time.
Have a good night.
All right, take it easy, guys. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.